You think this game studio that's never put out a game is going to be worth $1 billion in 10 years. All right.
Top gaming lawyer advice for anyone who negotiates an investor agreement.
Hey, Ninel, you have a lot of money. Give me $100,000 and I'll give you this safe. All Ninel gets is a piece of paper that is a future promise.
Aye.
The primary thing that they want to invest in are things that have either...
Hi, everyone. My name is Ninel Anderson. I'm CEO at Devoted Studios, and I'm your host at Devoted Speakeasy. This is a part 2 of our show with Brandon Huffman. Hi, Brandon.
Hi.
We are chatting about how in the era of finally money back, which is, as you guys know, in 2025, we had $373 million invested so far by VC firms, which is 35% more than last year. And we're going to talk today how to protect ourselves in negotiating deals with investors and how not to get overly excited when somebody sends you a deal term and you're like just sign everywhere.
We're beyond excited to bring this episode in partnership with Devoted Fusion. If you're a gaming studio hunting for insanely talented freelance artists, or you're an artist searching for a new gig, Devoted Fusion makes it super easy to connect and work on projects together. We take care of payments, paperwork, everything that people hate, so everybody can work and focus on creating the best content they can. If you're interested, check the link in the description of the video.
Where should I start? I'm like, I am an indie developer and I have a dream. I want to build a video game, that no one else have ever. It's a mix of genres, I'm super confident. When should I go to investor and when should I go to a publisher?
The scenario you just described of having one game is probably a better suited pitch to a publisher.
Okay.
Especially in this market,
Mm-hmm.
the VC firms, the institutional investors are not really looking at investing in single game projects. They do, some still do, but the primary thing that they want to invest in are things that have either they know that this game has such legs that it's going to be a franchise. It's a whole new IP.
Or it's a live ops game, right?
Live.
Okay.
And so even the franchise sequel potential, that's even a hard pitch. Things like a live ops pitch is a better pitch. An even better pitch is not a game at all, but tools and technology for games.
Okay.
Even if you're building those tools and technology to make a game, the actual value proposition is eventually selling those tools and tech.
How much can I get if I say the word AI in it?
AI is definitely there. Yeah, AI is definitely, it's the hot issue or a hot topic for investors right now. And, with good reason, we've seen widespread adoption of AI tools by mass markets in a way that I think, everybody's thought that VR would be the next big thing, and there is still an audience for VR.
VR will be the next big thing whenever we're going to get...
Eventually, it may be big, but the number of people who purchased headsets and engage in VR regularly versus the number of people who use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini on a daily basis, the market disruption of AI has already happened and is going to continue to be bigger. So if VCs can get their little piece of that, that's
so to sum up, I should go to an investor if I have a game that has a potential to be a franchise. I have a game that has strong live ops possibilities, or I have really strong underlying tools and technology behind the game that I'm building that could be valuable and can be sold to other companies, right?
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is if you have a company that you can pitch to an investor as why it's scalable, and a hit-driven pitch is not scalable pitch, right?
Right.
So it has to be something that apart from just the sales of one title could be scalable in some way.
I feel like the coolest story that I know was regards the tools behind, which I guess the unintentional tools. Do you know how Slack was built?
I don't.
Andrew Chan wrote about it in his book. So practically Slack was a video game before. They were a developer in San Francisco building a game, kind of like a cozy MMO-ish. and they had a vision, but they didn't have enough players for the game to become successful. So like there was not enough players to play.
Like most MMOs.
Yeah, like most MMOs, right? Instead of like winding down the company, they looked at like what do they have that is valuable and like what they can build upon. And actually, they were like one of the early companies that had remote team members in like Canada and some other places. And in order to communicate with each other, they had Skype before, but they were like, it doesn't really work for us to send files properly or create like groups or find each other. So they used, I don't know if you've ever were a part of MIRC networks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was my teenage time. And so they used MIRC and then built on top of it. And that's how they developed Slack. And they were like, well, I guess this video game didn't work out. How about we
make $1 billion?
I know, right?
Good for them. That's great.
So it's like
I think the classic tools example in games is Unreal, right?
Yeah.
Unreal was an engine built to power the game.
Wasn't it for Gear Wars?
It was but it was built by Epic
Yeah.
to power their own games. Is
Right.
the point? And then they went, oh, let's sell this on the side,
Right.
and then that quickly became the business until Fortnite, right?
Well, I remember I think it was 2013 where they had like deal terms and the deal terms for Epic were like $250,000 for licensing the engine. And that wasn't very successful. And Unity was giving away like their engine for like $1,000 per person, right? So your upfront investment wasn't as crazy. And then Cocos 2DX was like free. So
Mm-hmm.
and Unity was taking a bigger share. And then I think Epic like changed their deal terms. And next thing you know, everybody's on Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. I wonder when they're going to go public.
I would not put that on your 2025 predictions list.
I don't think either, but let me know if anyone knows how to invest in Unreal. Let me know. I want to put my $10 into that. So, what are the key things as a young and green developer I should be on the lookout for when negotiating a deal with an investor?
Sure. So when you score the investor, right, so to speak, they'll send you the term sheet. The term sheet will list out usually like 10, 12 terms. Some of those will be things that you as a developer will just gloss right over.
Does the LOI come first or the term sheet come, or it's the same thing?
It's one and the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't see an LOI and a term sheet usually, unless sometimes this almost never happens. But you might see an LOI that's more of like an expression of interest to try to lock you down from negotiating with other people before they have any terms ready. Probably you shouldn't sign that.
So it's like swiping on Tinder, but without messaging, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're going to get the term sheet, and that term sheet's going to list out some really key terms like how much is being invested, what are they getting in exchange for their investment in terms of percentage of the company, what rights are they taking. So typically an investor is going to want additional rights beyond just the right of ownership. So those are going to be things like a preference on liquidation.
Your firstborn.
Your firstborn, yeah. But definitely like a preference on liquidation. We can talk more about what that is.
Okay.
They may or may not ask for a board seat.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to want certain veto rights over certain company decisions, and the breadth of those is pretty standard. Usually it's all based on what are called the NVCA forms.
Right.
The National Venture Capital Association has a set of forms. They're very, very long forms. There's a lot of bracketed things that get shifted around, but the basic things that they're going to want approvals over are set out in there. But some in the game space especially may want additional approvals, or they may tweak those a little bit. Those are the big things. Occasionally, if it's a strategic investor, they may ask for like a side letter or an additional, commercial term, something like, we have a big presence in Asia, so we want right of first refusal in Asian distribution on your games. Or it might be, we have a publishing company in our portfolio, so you have to give them a first look at your games, or something along those lines if they're more strategic. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the number one thing you should fight for?
Oh, that's a tough one. Obviously cash. You want as much cash as you can get. Although not always. There's reasons to take less so that you don't take too much too early.
There's so many questions in one question. Like the question of valuation, I feel like is like someone valued at $30 million versus someone valued at $5 million versus someone and somewhat having similar products. Like what's the valuation based on, especially early days when you have like a prototype or whatever?
So the short answer there is it's based on confidence. venture capitalists view everything through the lens of their eventual return. If they invest $5 million at a $30 million valuation and they want to get 20% IRR, which functionally equates to like 5x, 10x returns, depending on when the company sells, they are going to need to make sure that your company, which they value at 20 million today, can be valued at 100 million or 200 million 5 to 10 years from now. Right.
So I have the song and the like, when you say RR, my brain just like froze there. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
so they're going to pick a valuation that is based on their confidence in your ability to scale to those numbers, right?
Okay.
So if you get a valuation of $100 million, you're going to need to be $1 billion company one day for them to get the returns they want.
Right.
And it's funny, like during the COVID times, we saw some term sheets that came in at 80 and $100 million valuations. And it was like, you think this game studio that's never put out a game is going to be worth $1 billion in 10 years. All right, great. We'll see how it goes.
I've definitely seen those. Luckily for some of my friends, they definitely got those. I'm really happy for them. So, but you said that it could be a bad thing for you too. Like, how can that be a bad thing?
Sure, it could be a bad thing if you get that $100 million valuation in the beginning, and so you get, say, a $20 million investment at a $100 million value. 20 million is probably high. Let's say you get a $10 million investment at a $100 million valuation. They take 10% of the company, but then $10 million is not enough to finish your project. So you go out for a Series A if that was your seed, or you go out for a Series B if that was your A. The graduation rate from seed to A to B in games is very low. So that's not a good strategy. It would probably be that you get the 10 million to develop 80% or 50% of the game, and then you go to your publisher. But let's say that they invest at that valuation, and then you get farther into development and you need more money. So you go out to new venture funds or new high net worth individuals to raise the rest of your money.
Right.
But they don't have the same confidence that first round investor did. So the valuation actually goes down. And if valuation goes down, not only do they get a higher percentage, but that first investor is going to have what they call protective provisions in their investment documents.
Right.
So their investment's going to get bigger, not financially bigger, but their portion of your company is going to grow. So you're going to get diluted by round 2 and round 1 again in round 2.
Wow.
And so the founders are going to end up with an even lower percentage if they end up with what's called a down round, where that valuation drops.
And so effectively you're just becoming an employee and not a founder.
You're getting to a much lower percentage. Yeah. It's not uncommon to drop below 50% founder ownership around Series A or maybe Series B, but around Series A, you drop to about 50 often.
So can you give me like a ladder of like how much percentage people give up at like pre-seed, seed, A, B?
Yeah, so it's kind of all over the map. There are definitely trends, but it's kind of all over the map, especially at pre-seed and seed, kind of all over the map. Pre-seed is often done in convertibles, so things like a safe or a convertible note, usually a safe in the game space. A safe is when I say convertible, what that means is it's not actual equity, but it converts into equity later. And so your pre-seed you do on a convertible, and then if you do your seed on actual equity, the safe then converts into that round and becomes part of that investment round, even though you got the money earlier.
You have to explain it again.
Sure. So if I am raising a pre-seed round of $100,000 just to get the company off the ground.
Right.
And I come to you and I say, hey, Ninel, you have a lot of money. Give me $100,000 and I'll give you this safe. All Ninel gets is a piece of paper that is a future promise.
Okay.
And then when I later go, okay, I've spent some of my $100,000, I'm ready to go pitch for the big money, and I go out and I raise $5 million.
Right.
Your $100,000 becomes a part of that $5 million round, and you get whatever those investors get, usually at a discount or at a cap. So a cap would be if we set the valuation in your safe at, say, $10 million, you're know that you're gonna get your percentage of your $100,000 would be what 1% of the company at that conversion event. So that's what a safe is, and that's what we often see in a pre-seed is a safe or a convertible note, which operates similarly but is debt.
Why would somebody want to go with debt instead of just getting an equity? Because it's hard to value the company.
So that's the safe also doesn't really imply a valuation. So so debt, it may just be the investor preference. It may be a tax reason to want it, not not generally, but there may be. There could also be, you may want debt because the safe comes with some other things that people don't often talk about, but things like between the two, between a safe and a convertible note,
Right.
if you never raise that next round,
Yeah.
like you get the $100,000 in on the safe and you manage to release something and it makes you a bunch of money,
Yay!
and then you reinvest that into your next product or something like that, and you never raise again, that safe never converts until you liquidate the company.
Mm.
And then it converts at a pretty big percentage because it's capped on what the valuation is, right?
Right.
So if you liquidate the company for $1 billion, well, now it's going to convert at a $10 million valuation and it's going to be 1% of $1 billion
Right.
instantly. But a convertible note is going to be debt. It's just going to sort of accrue interest just like any other debt would. And there you can build in other conversion triggers in a convertible note. So it could be when we release a product for this amount,
Mm-hmm.
or when we have this revenue target, it converts. Or it could be when we sell the company, or it could be typically,
Right.
often it's going to be when we raise more money.
So in what cases would you go with a safe versus a convertible? If I'm a founder, right?
Yeah.
What would I prefer?
Usually you prefer a safe because it's simpler.
Okay.
The convertible note has a lot more variables, a lot
Mhm.
more things to think about. And the reason you're doing this in like the pre-seed is usually just to get you to the real money.
Okay.
And so you want the simplest thing possible. You don't want to think about all the downstream effects of it often, but you want the simplest thing possible because your mind is on launching a company.
And so the dilution provisions only make sense for the A and B rounds, or because if you're raising in a pre-seed and a safe or a convertible note, that dilution is not really a question for you at that point, right?
At that point, yeah. When you get down the line to your seed or your A or whatever
Mhm.
your first price round is, that's when you really start to worry about dilution. But you should worry about dilution with a safe or a convertible because they are going to become equity in that
Got it.
round. So if you discount them too heavily, they'll get an outsized percentage.
When you're saying discounting them, could you elaborate it for our amazing viewers?
So if you're a developer and you raise money with a safe,
Mhm.
that safe eventually is going to become equity in your company.
Okay.
And the amount of equity that the person who bought the safe gets depends on the terms of that safe. And the terms of that safe are usually going to offer some sort of a discount on the next round. So if
Mm.
you go out and you raise money from an institutional venture capital firm and they buy in at, say, $1 a share,
Right.
that safe might be buying in technically at like 80 cents a share.
Okay.
So they're going to get more equity
Because they came in early.
because they came in early, they
Yeah.
took some risk. But if you don't think through what that dilution will be, you may end up giving them way too much equity in that subsequent round without
Right.
really doing it intentionally.
How do you protect yourself?
You just make sure the numbers work.
Okay.
You pick discounts that are 5, 10, 20% at most, or you
Okay.
pick valuation caps that you're comfortable saying, if we hit this cap, we're only giving up 1%, we're giving up 5%, we're giving
Got
up
it.
whatever you're comfortable giving up, that's what you're giving
So
up.
you need to be really good with spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets. It all comes down to spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets, my favorite.
Yeah, when you get to price rounds, you have these really convoluted terms like anti-dilution protection, right?
Mhm.
Which when you do round one, you raise money at this valuation. When you do
Mhm.
round two, you hope that it's at a higher valuation. If it's
Right.
at a lower valuation, the previous investor will either get a full ratchet, meaning they get the benefit of the lower price, or they will do a weighted average, which is a spreadsheet math thing that will basically give them some amount of extra equity. But in both cases, that plays into the down round we talked about earlier, where it basically just means they get more equity. Broad-based weighted average gives them a little bit more. A full ratchet gives them a whole lot more.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what do you want?
So you want the broad-based weighted average.
Okay.
They're never going to settle for no anti-dilution. They're going to
Mhm.
want something.
Okay.
You kind of get it, right? If you overprice your round, then they want the benefit of the next round being lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Which is probably what's been happening in the market in general. And that's why it has been so much harder to raise money because it mostly has been down rounds.
Yeah,
Right.
or no round at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. The graduation rate from seed, which we saw a lot of seed rounds,
Yeah.
with the resume of a Blizzard, or the resume, you've got a resume line from Blizzard, you've got a resume line from Epic, you've got a resume line from
Mhm.
whoever else. You could go out and raise seed rounds really easily for a long time. And, raising $1 million is not as hard as raising $5 million. So a seed round is often like easier to get, but definitely was very easy to get for a while there.
Yeah.
And so the graduation from seed to A, where you're raising substantially more money and you're scaling up the team, is like the lowest it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
But the graduation from A to B is basically non-existent if you're developing games.
Ouchie.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't figured out and haven't shipped the game by the B round, I mean, there is a bigger problem.
That is exactly the investor's perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Control, right? Nobody wants to give up control in this process, right? There is like board, there's veto rights, there's a bunch of things that you could do. Like, how do you protect that you as a founder or the founding team have the control over how you run your company?
Yeah, so mostly VCs will let you run your company, the day-to-day of your company. They don't want to run the day-to-day of your company. Mostly they want to make sure that you're running the company in a way that will make money.
Right.
But the day-to-day of decisions around, this is what we want these characters to look like, they don't want any part of that. The reason they're investing in you is that they trust you to do those things. So the control terms they're going to want are more around things like, can you take another round of investment, which affects them? Can you sell the company, which affects them? Where some of the game-specific VCs are a little more savvy than the general VCs is that they may want veto rights over things like exclusive licenses, which would encompass things like publishing agreements.
Right.
So they may want to be able to decide if your publishing deal is good enough.
Yeah.
And you kind of get it. They're funding the company. They're going to want to make sure that the deal is a good one for them, not just for you. And your interests should be aligned in that. But it may be that you really want to work with publisher A because you really love the products they put out, but their terms aren't quite as good as publisher B.
Right.
But publisher B has a reputation for being crappy to the developers.
Ouchie.
Even though they make more money or they're offering more money or whatever it is. So the incentives aren't always 100% aligned, but the financial incentives are.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you want to not give away that right.
You want to try not to give away that right. But sometimes you do see them ask for that. The other thing you'll frequently see, not always in a seed, and certainly not in a pre-seed, but definitely by A, typically you'll see a board seat. They'll want a seat on the board of the company. For first-time founders, sometimes they're like, what even does the board do?
I have a friend that has 13 people on their board. They're not a gaming company.
Not
and
an
they're
advisory, like a real board?
Full board.
Yeah. Are they a public company?
No, they're PE backed, but 13.
That's a big board.
Yeah, it's a big board. Managing all of those people because they email you and ask you about, can you do better?
Yeah. So typically when the founders start the company, depending on how many founders there are, either all of the founders or some subset of the founders will be on the board. A board of one is also not uncommon when you have like 1-star founder.
Right.
But then by the time you add an investor board member, you want to make sure that you're stacking the board so that it's maybe 2 founders and 1 investor, or 3 founders and 2 investors at a Series A.
So you win.
So you can win on the typical votes that you take, not the things they have the veto rights over. The things they have the veto rights over, it doesn't matter if you've got 3 votes and they've got 2 because they've got the veto rights.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the typical things you don't want to give away the veto rights besides the licensing?
That's one of the big ones. Another one is compensation. You want to be able to decide what the team gets paid.
Got it.
If they even include anything about compensation, they'll usually be okay with giving that up so that you can set compensation for the team as long as it's like within reason.
Right.
But they often will want veto rights over executive compensation. So like what you pay yourself as the founder, they're probably going to want some sort of control over. Because otherwise you raise $1 million from a VC and then you say, okay, now I'm paying myself $750,000 a year. And then you're just burning that money real fast, right?
Well, if that's your goal, why not?
Yeah, because they won't let you.
Speaking about founders in general, and I've experienced that a few times with my friends in the industry and outside of gaming industry where they, decide to found a company with their friends or their coworkers on like the same, terms. Like everybody gets like,
everybody's 25%.
Quarter of a company, whatever. And Jim all of a sudden decides not to show up to work or has some family problems or, like nobody's getting paid at the early stages but you already, established a company and you owe Jim 25% of the company, right? And the excitement slowly goes away and then you're stuck with the people and the equity that you gave them away. Even not speaking about VC, like when you're starting a company with your buddies, how do you look at like vesting provisions and how do you make sure everybody puts the same amount of effort and commitment.
Yeah, that's tough. There are a lot of methodologies out there that make it even more complicated. So the one that comes up a lot is the slicing pie method. This is very popular and trendy among people who Google. But it's not usually one that we recommend doing, just because it is pretty complicated to actually implement until you what they call bake the pie. But so we just suggest baking the pie at the beginning. So what we always suggest is imposing vesting on even your friends and yourself too, right? Because we're the company lawyer often, not your individual lawyer for one founder. We're the lawyer for the company that's been founded by that person. So we usually suggest subjecting everybody to some vesting requirement. So, and the typical vesting requirement is 4 years with a 1-year cliff, which means that you get a quarter of your equity after you've done 1 year. But we've seen some pretty creative vesting schedules that are things like you will vest as you hit these milestones, or you will vest as the company hits these milestones.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Because it's not subjective to you,
It's
right?
not you. You're supposed to be playing a part in that. And if you don't get to that milestone because you get hit by a bus or you are just a jerk and you're not working hard enough, then they let you go, you're gone, and you don't vest, right?
Right.
And so that's a big thing. The other thing we sometimes see, this is more in like a more indie studio that's not going for VC backing, but sometimes we'll see in like LLC agreements a right of repurchase, even if it's not at all tied to vesting. So if somebody leaves, then the company can buy back their equity.
Right.
And that valuation might be debatable, but might be preset, and they can buy it back.
Anything with regards to vesting you want to kind of touch base with regards to investors?
So investors are going to want to see vesting.
Yeah.
Depending on how soon after the company's formed and that initial vesting is imposed, some investors are going to want to do what we call revest. So basically take that 4-year clock and restart it when they invest. And the reason for that is that they want you there for 4 years from when they invest, not 4 years from when you form the company.
Okay.
That said, founders often push back on that. Usually the pushback on that is a discussion about, well, how long is our actual development cycle? If you know the game's going to ship, or if the game is slated to ship in 2 years, you can be reasonably sure it's going to ship in 3. So if
this is not an advice.
If you've got a 4-year vesting cycle and you're less than a year into it, the investors may be cool with riding out the rest of that same cycle because they know you're going to ship the product before that, and that's their real goal, right? They want to make sure that you have there's revenue coming in, that there's sustainability in the company, and that's why they want the founding team there for the first 4 years.
Right, because you usually invest into people, right, rather than anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the drag along rights?
So drag along rights, so this is one of those investor rights that they're going to ask for. Basically, a drag along right is something that ensures that you don't have a few shareholders holding up a sale of the company. So if you as the founders and the board and the investors all agree, like, hey, we want to sell the company, we've got Tencent, we've got Microsoft, whoever wants to buy our company, it's a good price, but one of your founders is like, hey, I don't want to work for that company. A drag along right enables you to make that guy sell his shares too. And it's a good thing to have from a company perspective.
So you're dragging your buddies along.
Along. And then often we see alongside a drag along right something called a co-sale right. So if this subset of shareholders go, hey, Tencent, Microsoft, whatever, you're going to buy our shares, then the rest of the shareholders can go, well, you're not just going to buy their shares. You're going to buy my shares too. And maybe Microsoft only wants to buy this number of shares. Well, then we're all going to get to sell a portion of our shares up to that number. It's not just going to be you guys making money. I want to make money too.
Let's go back to strategics, right? Because things get like really messy there, especially like if a strategic is your publisher and they usually ask for like things like right of first refusal. And how do you deal with that?
So we didn't talk about right of first refusal in the publishing segment, but yeah, definitely right of first refusal, right of first negotiation. Those are rights where if you have a game and it ships and it's great, and then you have another game, they will come in, the publishers will say, okay, well, you've got your next game idea. You have to pitch it to me. Or worse, you've got your next game, you've pitched it to me and I've said no, and then you've gone off and you've pitched it to all these other people. You've got to come back to me when you get an offer from somebody over there.
Right.
And then I get to say, oh, I like that offer. I'd do that deal. And then you have to do it with me. That's a right of first refusal. Or a right of last match, sometimes you hear it called. In the investor sense, often that is broadened not just to your next game or, territory rights or something like that, but it may be for the whole company.
Right.
Sometimes you see publishers try for that, and that's a pretty big ask for a publisher, especially if you're a multi-game studio. If it's your third, fourth game, why would you sell to your publisher?
Right.
Or why would you be committed to sell to your publisher? But in the investor sense, especially if they're your first investor, it might make, or a first big investor and they're a strategic investor, it might make more sense to agree to that.
I mean, I'm just like trying to deconstruct what would be the difference between the last match and right of first refusal in that case. Like in the right of first refusal, I come first to you, and if you said no, then I can go back to others, and then last match, I can go to you and then go to others, but then you have the right last word.
Yeah, so these get phrased poorly by people, but so right of first negotiation is the easy one, right? I have to come talk to you before I can sell my company. Easy, right? Right of first refusal is, in theory, before I make an offer to anyone to sell the company, I have to offer it to you.
Right.
But the way that usually gets implemented is actually a right of last match, so that anytime there's a deal presented, whether I present it to someone or someone presents it to me, I have to take it to you first.
So it's not as bad, right?
It's not terrible.
Unless I don't want to work with you anymore.
Exactly. If you don't want to work with that strategic anymore, then that's a real problem. And so for other buyers, we sometimes hear these called like poison pills, right? Because if I'm Microsoft and I'm looking at your studio for acquisition, but then I find out whatever I offer you, you have to take it to Sony.
Yeah.
I'm not going to want to offer you top dollar because I don't know. Or maybe I am going to want to offer you top dollar, but I'm still going to be worried that Sony's going to snake the deal out from under me, right?
How do you get rid of an investor? Like, let's say, you have very different growth expectations, or it's not a fit, or somebody's just being not a nice person. Like, how do you get rid of an investor?
Once they're on your cap table?
Yeah. Money? You buy them out?
You buy them out. I mean, frankly, like they invested to get a return.
Right.
And so that's how you get them out. Occasionally, so the other path is to find somebody to buy them out for you, right?
Okay.
To find another investor.
Can you force them into a sale as long as the terms are, or they can decide not to sell?
Almost certainly not.
Okay.
They're not going to want to agree to that. They would have to agree to that up front, and they're almost never going to do that. Yeah.
So you're stuck with them unless they want to go.
Unless they want to go. But maybe if the relationship is bad, they would be willing to take either just the return of their investment or some amount more than that to go. And it doesn't necessarily have to be you buying them out, right? If you have money from investor A who you originally liked and you don't like them anymore because they're being mean or because you don't like their politics or whatever it is, right? And then investor B comes along and wants a chunk of your company, but you don't actually need their cash. You could just say to investor B, well, buy out investor A. And then you're going to be on my cap table, right? But I don't get any money from you. You're not actually investing in the growth of my company. You're investing in just owning a piece of it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different strategy for an investor.
Getting rid of anyone is a very complicated
Getting
process.
rid of people is tough.
I loved it. I feel like I've learned so much. I feel like I would need to re-listen to this episode at least a few times just for all of this information to settle because my brain is like, Any final words for negotiating a deal with investor for our viewers?
So definitely as soon as you get the term sheet, or even before you get a term sheet, you should be talking to a lawyer. You may also want to talk to like a financial advisor who is experienced in the space of VC deals because there's a lot of terms. Like we covered not all of them in this podcast. So I think it's worthwhile to make sure that you understand those things. Also, like read a book. Right? It doesn't
Any
hurt.
books you want to recommend?
So there's one called like Mastering the Art of Venture Capital, which is a pretty good book, but also it's like 400 pages and written for MBA students. So it's not the best read, but it has a lot of good information in it. It's probably easier to, if you want to focus on building games, it's probably easier to pay someone to read your term sheet and tell you what it says.
Well, if you're a poor indie developer, it's not always that you even have the money for the lawyer.
So so that's actually a good thing that we should probably cover very quickly, which is like a lot of lawyers who work on VC deals will defer their billing until the deal closes. So if you do have that term sheet, like don't hesitate to pick up the phone or, send the email probably more realistically. and have the lawyer look it over and get some advice because that lawyer will probably not charge you for that until you sign and close the deal.
Amazing. I've learned something really helpful. I hope you guys learned something really helpful.
So you can make the VCs pay your legal fees, right? They're also going to take your investment dollars to pay their legal fees.
Catch-22.
Catch-22. Yeah.
Well, Brennan, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of developers out there to not get trapped in the terms that might get them chained for years and years in a deal that they don't want to be a part of. And thanks to you, they are protected.
Yeah. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.